I should have seen it coming when Mom started acting weird around me 3 weeks before Sarah's birthday. You know that fake, cheerful voice parents use when they're hiding something? That's exactly how she sounded when she called me that Tuesday evening while I was heating up leftover Chinese takeout in my tiny studio apartment. Sarah, my baby sister, was turning 25. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The one who got a brand new Honda Civic for her 18th birthday, while I got a used bike from Craigslist for mine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I remember stirring my lo mein with one hand while holding the phone with the other, listening to Mom ramble about party planning. The smell of garlic and soy sauce filled my cramped kitchen, and I was already dreading whatever favor she was about to ask. It always started the same way, excessive pleasantries. Asking about my job at the insurance office, pretending to care about my mundane daily routine. My job. God, I hate talking about it. I've been processing claims for 3 years now, sitting in a gray cubicle under fluorescent lights that make everyone look like they're dying. But it pays the bills, and more importantly, it gave me that credit card that would later become the center of this whole mess. I got approved for a Capital One card 6 months earlier. Nothing fancy, just a $5,000 limit, but it felt like freedom. My first real credit card. I'd been so careful with it, using it only for emergencies and paying it off immediately. My credit score was finally climbing out of the hole I dug in college with those stupid student loans. Mom's voice snapped me back to reality. She was explaining how they wanted to throw Sarah a surprise party at Tony's Italian restaurant downtown. The same restaurant where we celebrated Dad's 50th birthday 2 years ago, where I had to sit at the kids' table because all the adult spots were taken by Sarah's friends. Even though I was 23 at the time, the plan sounded elaborate. Too elaborate. Tony's wasn't cheap. And I knew Mom and Dad were still struggling with Dad's medical bills from his surgery last year. He'd been out of work for 4 months, and Mom's part-time job at the dental office barely covered their mortgage. But Sarah was their princess, and princesses get castle-worthy celebrations. I should have hung up right then. Should have said I was busy, that I had plans, that I couldn't help. But there's something about family guilt that just paralyzes you. It's like being trapped in emotional quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper you sink. Mom wasn't directly asking for me, not yet. She was just sharing the details, getting me invested in the idea. Sarah wanted a specific theme, some Pinterest-worthy, garden party aesthetic with fairy lights and mason jars and those expensive macaroons from that boutique bakery on 5th Street. The kind of party that costs more than most people's rent. I found myself nodding along, even though she couldn't see me. My lo mein was getting cold, but I didn't care. I was already doing the math in my head, wondering how they'd pull this off. Dad's pride would never let him admit they couldn't afford it. Mom would stress herself into a migraine trying to make it perfect on a shoestring budget. That's when she dropped the first hint. She mentioned how tight things had been lately. How they wanted to give Sarah the party she deserved but weren't sure how to manage all the expenses. The catering alone would be $800. The decorations, the flowers, the cake, it was all adding up. I could feel the trap closing around me, but I walked right into it anyway. I offered to help with some of the costs, not all of it. I wasn't stupid, but maybe a couple $100. I had been saving up for a new laptop, but Sarah's happiness felt more important in that moment. Family first, right? Mom's relief was palpable through the phone. She thanked me over and over, promising they'd pay me back as soon as Dad got his next insurance payout. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. These were my parents, the people who raised me, who sacrificed for me. Surely they wouldn't take advantage of my generosity. But they also didn't mention that I wouldn't be getting an invitation to the party I was helping to fund. I found out about that particular detail 3 days later, completely by accident. I was at the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle, trying to decide between generic cornflakes and the name brand, when I ran into Sarah's best friend, Michelle. We'd known each other since high school, had that polite acquaintance relationship where we'd chat if we bumped into each other but never made actual plans. Michelle was buying ingredients for what she called a pre-party dinner. She was hosting a few of Sarah's closest friends before the main event, she explained, and she needed to pick up wine and cheese for the appetizers. She was so excited about the surprise, babbling about how beautiful the decorations were going to be and how Sarah was going to die when she saw the cake. I stood there, holding my box of cereal, smiling and nodding, waiting for her to mention when I should show up, when she should pick me up, when we should coordinate our arrivals. But she didn't. She just kept talking about the guest list, rattling off names of people I barely knew. College friends of Sarah's who'd driven in from out of town, co-workers from her marketing job, even some guy she'd been casually dating for 2 months. My stomach started churning. This sick, hollow feeling spread through my chest as I realized what was happening. I wasn't invited. My own sister's birthday party, the one I was helping to pay for, and I wasn't even on the guest list. I managed to keep my composure until Michelle left, gave her a bright smile, and told her to have fun. But as soon as she rounded the corner toward the produce section, I abandoned my cart and walked straight back to my car. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the receipt from last night's dinner, trying to process what I'd just learned. The rational part of my brain tried to make excuses. Maybe it was just a small gathering. Maybe they were planning to tell me later. Maybe Michelle was confused. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was exactly the kind of thing my family would do. Take my money, but not include me in the celebration. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with memories of every other time I'd been excluded. Sarah's high school graduation party, where I was expected to help serve food but not actually participate. The family vacation to the beach house that I paid for but couldn't join because I had to work. My own college graduation dinner that got canceled because Sarah had a dance recital the same weekend. The pattern was so clear now. I was the family ATM, the reliable older sister who could always be counted on to help out financially, but never seemed to earn a seat at the actual table. I was useful when they needed something, invisible when they were having fun. I spent the rest of the week in a weird emotional limbo. Part of me wanted to call Mom and demand an explanation. Part of me wanted to text Sarah directly and ask why I wasn't invited to her party. But mostly, I just felt numb. This deep, bone-tired exhaustion that comes from realizing you've been playing a game where everyone else knew the rules except you. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into processing claims, grateful for the mindless routine of checking forms and making phone calls. My cubicle mate, Janet, kept asking if I was okay because I'd stopped joining the group for lunch. I told her I was fine, just tired. It was easier than explaining that my family had turned me into their personal piggy bank. The party was scheduled for Saturday night. I had no idea what I was going to do with myself. I couldn't exactly show up uninvited, but I also couldn't sit at home wondering what I was missing. I considered going to a movie, maybe treating myself to dinner at that new sushi place downtown. Anything to avoid thinking about the celebration I wasn't welcome to attend. Friday afternoon, Mom called again. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. She sounded stressed, more frantic than usual. There had been some last-minute changes to the party plans. The catering company had raised their prices, and they needed extra money for the upgraded flower arrangements Sarah had insisted. Could I possibly help out with another few $100s? I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, listening to her explain how important this party was for Sarah, how she'd been looking forward to it for months, how they wanted everything to be perfect. Not once did she mention that I'd be there to see any of it. That's when I made my first mistake. Instead of saying no, instead of asking why I wasn't invited, I said yes. I told her I could put the extra costs on my credit card. I even offered to call the catering company myself to handle the payment. I was so conditioned to help, so trained to be the responsible one. That I couldn't break the pattern even when I knew I was being used. Mom was thrilled. She gave me all the vendor contact information and told me to coordinate with the restaurant directly. I would be handling the catering, the flowers, and the cake. Essentially, I was planning and paying for a party I wasn't invited to attend. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent Saturday morning on the phone with Tony's Italian restaurant, confirming the menu and making sure they had my credit card information on file. I ordered Sarah's favorite dishes, chicken parmigiana, lasagna, that expensive seafood risotto she always got when we went out for special occasions. I even upgraded the appetizer selection because I knew she loved those stuffed mushrooms. While I was finalizing the flower arrangements over the phone, I wondered if Sarah even knew I was paying for all this. Did she think Mom and Dad had suddenly come into money? Did she care where the funds were coming from as long as she got her perfect party? I finished all the arrangements by noon and then sat in my apartment, staring at the walls. The party would be starting in a few hours. Sarah would be surprised, delighted, surrounded by all her friends and family. Well, almost all her family. I tried to distract myself with Netflix, but I couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a last-minute invitation that never came. Maybe Sarah would realize I was missing and insist I be included. Maybe Mom would call and apologize for the oversight. Maybe someone would remember that I existed. But my phone stayed silent except for a few work emails and a spam text about extending my car warranty. Around 7 o'clock, I broke down and drove past Tony's Italian restaurant. I told myself I was just going to the grocery store, that I needed milk and bread. But really, I wanted to see the party I'd created but couldn't attend. I wanted to see if it was worth what I'd spent on it. I parked across the street and watched through the restaurant's large windows. The decorations looked beautiful, exactly like Sarah had probably imagined. The fairy lights created a warm, magical atmosphere, and the flowers were arranged perfectly on each table. I could see Sarah in the center of it all, wearing a blue dress I'd never seen before, laughing and hugging friends. She looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy. And for a moment, I felt glad that I'd helped make that possible, even if I couldn't be part of it. But then I saw Dad raising a toast, his arm around Sarah's shoulders, probably telling some story about what a wonderful daughter she was. I saw Mom taking pictures with her phone, capturing every moment of Sarah's perfect night. I saw all of Sarah's friends gathered around her, celebrating her existence, making her feel loved and special. And I realized that not one of them had even noticed I was missing. I drove home crying, ugly sobs that made me pull over twice because I couldn't see the road. I felt so stupid for thinking things would be different, so naive for believing that my financial contributions would somehow earn me a place in the family inner circle. The bills started arriving the following week. The catering company charged my card for $1,247. The florist was $320. The cake was another $180, plus the original few hundred I'd given Mom for decorations and miscellaneous expenses. All told, I'd spent over $2,000 on a party I wasn't invited to. I stared at my credit card statement, watching my available credits shrink to almost nothing. My carefully managed finances, my slowly improving credit score, my plans for a new laptop all sacrificed for Sarah's perfect birthday celebration. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the silence that followed. No thank you call from Sarah. No acknowledgement from Mom or Dad. No family group text with pictures from the party. It was like the event had never happened, at least as far as I was concerned. I waited 3 days before calling Mom. I told myself I was just checking in, making sure everything had gone smoothly. But really, I wanted some kind of recognition, a thank you, an explanation, something to justify what I'd done. Mom answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. She was at Sarah's apartment, helping her write thank you notes for all the gifts she'd. The party had been perfect, she said. Everyone had such a wonderful time. Sarah was so happy. I waited for her to mention my contribution, to thank me for making it all possible, to explain why I hadn't been there to see Sarah's happiness firsthand. But she didn't say any of that. She just asked if I was doing okay, told me she had to go because they were meeting Sarah's friends for brunch, and hung up. I sat there holding my phone, staring at the blank screen, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. This was my family. These were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And they'd taken my money, excluded me from the celebration, and then acted like nothing had happened. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I called Sarah directly. Not Mom, not Dad, but Sarah herself. I needed to hear her voice, to understand how she felt about what had happened. Maybe she didn't know I'd paid for everything. Maybe she'd assumed I was invited and wondered why I didn't show up. Sarah sounded surprised to hear from me. We didn't talk often, usually just exchanged pleasantries at family gatherings. But she was in a good mood, still riding the high from her party. She started telling me all about it before I could even ask. The food had been amazing, she said. The decorations were exactly what she'd dreamed of. Everyone had loved the cake, and she'd gotten so many wonderful gifts. Michelle had taken hundreds of pictures, and she was already planning to make a scrapbook. I listened to her enthusiasm, trying to work up the courage to ask the questions that were eating at me. Finally, I managed to say that I'd heard it was a beautiful party and that I was sorry I couldn't be there. Sarah paused. For a moment, I thought she was going to apologize, to say she'd wanted to invite me but it had been a small gathering, that she'd missed having me there. Instead, she said, "Oh, it was just a small thing. You know how it is." That was it. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of what I'd done to make her perfect night possible. Just a casual dismissal, like I was some distant acquaintance who couldn't be expected to attend family events. I ended the call quickly after that, claiming I had to get some sleep for work. But I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, finally understanding my place in this family dynamic. I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who could be counted on to help out when needed. But I wasn't one of them, not really. The next few weeks were a blur of depression and I went through the motions at work, came home to my empty apartment, ordered takeout, and watched TV until I fell asleep on the couch. I ignored calls from Mom and deleted text messages from Dad asking how I was doing. I couldn't handle their fake concern, their pretend interest in my life. My credit card bill arrived, and I could barely make the minimum payment. The interest charges were already starting to accumulate, and I realized it would take me months to pay off what I'd spent on Sarah's party. Months of living paycheck to paycheck, of eating ramen noodles and skipping social activities, all because I'd been stupid enough to believe that generosity would earn me acceptance. I started avoiding family gatherings after that. When Mom called to invite me to Sunday dinner, I claimed I had to work. When Dad asked if I wanted to join them for Sarah's graduation celebration, yes. There was another party, and no. I wasn't expected to help pay for it. I said I had food poisoning. The truth was, I couldn't face them. I couldn't sit at their table, making small talk and pretending everything was normal, when I knew exactly how little I meant to them. I couldn't watch Sarah be the center of attention while I sat on the sidelines, invisible and unimportant. But avoiding them didn't make the pain go away. It just made it fester, turning into a deep resentment that colored everything I did. I started therapy, finally admitting to myself that I needed help processing what had happened. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, helped me understand that what my family had done was a form of emotional abuse. They'd taken advantage of my love and loyalty, using my desire to belong against me. It took months of sessions before I could even say the words out loud. My family used me. They took my money and excluded me from the celebration. They made me feel like I didn't matter. Dr. Martinez helped me see that this wasn't just about one party. It was about a lifetime of being treated as less important than Sarah, of being valued for what I could provide rather than who I was. The credit card incident was just the most blatant example of a pattern that had been going on for years. I started setting boundaries. When Mom called asking for help with Dad's birthday present, I said no. When Sarah texted asking if I could lend her money for a security deposit on a new apartment, I didn't respond. When Dad asked if I could help them with their mortgage payment, I told him I couldn't afford it. The pushback was immediate and intense. Mom accused me of being selfish. Dad said I was abandoning my family when they needed me most. Sarah acted hurt and confused, like she couldn't understand why I was suddenly being so cold. But I held firm. I'd learned that no was a complete sentence, that I didn't owe them explanations or justifications for protecting myself. I'd spent too many years trying to buy their love and acceptance, and it had only left me broke and broken. The hardest part was accepting that they might never change, that Mom would always see me as a resource to be managed rather than a daughter to be cherished. That Dad would always turn to me when he needed help but never think to include me when it was time to celebrate. That Sarah would always be the golden child, the one worthy of perfect parties and unconditional support. I had to grieve the family I'd thought I had, the one that existed only in my imagination. The family where everyone was valued equally, where love wasn't conditional on usefulness, where I had a place at the table instead of just being expected to help set it. It's been 8 months since Sarah's party now. I've paid off the credit card debt, finally, though it took selling my car and riding the bus to work for 3 months. I've started dating someone new, a guy named Marcus who works in accounting at a company downtown. He's kind and funny, and most importantly, he seems to value me for who I am rather than what I can do for him. I still struggle with family events. I went to Mom's birthday dinner last month, my first family gathering since the party incident. It was awkward and tense, but I survived it. I brought a card and a small gift, nothing extravagant. I stayed for exactly 2 hours and then left. Sarah tried to talk to me afterward, pulling me aside to ask why I'd been so distant lately. I looked at her standing there in her designer dress, paid for by her marketing job and probably supplemented by Mom and Dad's continued financial support. And I felt ... nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a calm indifference. I told her I'd been busy with work and left it at that. There was no point in explaining what she'd never understand. She'd never see herself as anything other than deserving of special treatment, and I'd never be more than a supporting character in her story. But I'm writing my own story now. I'm learning to value myself the way I always valued them. I'm building relationships with people who see me as more than a credit card with legs. I'm discovering who I am when I'm not trying to buy love or earn acceptance. The credit card is still in my wallet, but I use it differently now. I buy myself things that make me happy, books, nice dinners, a weekend trip to the mountains. I'm learning that I deserve to be the beneficiary of my own generosity, that taking care of myself isn't selfish. Sometimes I wonder if my family has learned anything from what happened, if they've realized how badly they hurt me, how deeply they betrayed my trust. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. I've stopped waiting for apologies that will never come, stopped hoping for changes that will never happen. I'm building a life where I matter, where my presence is valued, where I don't have to pay for my place at the table. It's a smaller life in some ways, lonelier in others. But it's mine, and that's enough. The woman who maxed out her credit card for a party she wasn't invited to doesn't exist anymore. In her place is someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more careful about who she trusts with her heart. Someone who knows that real family doesn't leave you standing in the cold, watching your love through restaurant windows. Someone who finally understands that you can't buy belonging, but you can certainly price yourself out of it. And sometimes, that's the most valuable lesson of all.